So what qualifies me as someone who's not a Scot to talk about tartan snow battle for the pistes? Well, my involvement in Scottish skiing goes back a long way, but before we even get to Scottish skiing, we have to consider the matter of cold and snow. And I'm very, very familiar with both. My first real contact with extreme temperature happened in Colorado in very, very late, just after Christmas 1973. We were in an old VW camper up in the San Juan Mountains, eventually getting to Telluride, and on one occasion the temperature got down to minus 40. It was minus 42 Fahrenheit, which is round about minus 40 centigrade, and that was unbelievably cold. Since then I have been dog sledding in temperatures of minus 38 in Finland, and I have been trying to take photographs in very low temperatures where skiing in Scandinavia is stopped when it gets to minus 25. It is still pretty cold at minus 10, 12, 14, 18 even, and I have photographed extensively in those temperatures, and believe me, most cameras don't like working once you get that low. I was a ski instructor on Cairngorm back in the early 70s, and with an occasional foray a little bit later than that. I have spent the past 55 or so years going up to Scotland, sometimes going back to find I was disappointed by very low snowfall or very high temperatures. And that is part of Scotland's problem. It is a weather of extremes in Scotland, but that doesn't deter the Scot. And I felt it was about time I wrote about it, because underlining it all and undermining it all was the original corruption that surrounded the Aviemore Centre. In Tartan Snow Battle for the Pistes, I have been able to research a book which was so controversial that upon publication it was pulped. Only 3 copies remain, and 2 of them are almost inaccessible. But fortunately, through the National Library of Wales at Aberystwyth, I managed to get hold of one, look through, and it was John Polson's account of his gifts, as he called it, to the senior civil servant George Pottinger, and the scandal that surrounded them in putting up what was perceived to be an original architectural installation with the Aviemore Centre, but in fact was not. On top of that, we had the original ski lifts, which were catch as catch can and maintained by engineers who knew their stuff. They've mostly shuffled off this mortal coil or retired, and a new generation of managers came in, some who knew what they were doing, others who plainly did not. Overall has been the Highland Islands Development Board that eventually became Highland Island Enterprise. Now, I don't want you to think that the vicissitudes of Cairngorm are necessarily what have played out across the rest of Scotland. That is not true. Some areas, such as Glenshee and Glencoe, have managed extremely well, despite the odds, and frequently from not getting the money this writer at least feels they deserve. Nevis Range started extremely well. Something's happened to their management since, but you will read about it in the book. I have written extensively for the history press, and this is a bit different from my previous output. Yet I have written about extreme cold, as endured by my poor father in Siberia, in Gulag to Spitfire, but that's another story. Tartan Snow holds a mirror up to the whole of Scottish skiing. What has gone on, what went right, what went wrong and how it affected me and hundreds, if not thousands, of other skiers. It comes out later this year. Look out for it, because it doesn't read like any other skiing book. Thank you.